In the Gun, episode number 76. The Dan Moses episode of ITG. It's time to get into some Big 12 predictions here. A couple other headlines as we look back at week 0 as well here too. It is In the Gun, your new favorite WVU football podcast. I'm Wes Uhler with the best teammates in the business, the runaway beer truck Owen Schmitt and the signal caller Jed Drenning. And as always, this episode of ITG brought to you in part by our friends at Bet Online, your number one source for all of your betting needs. You can get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, college football, NFL right around the corner, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live bets and all your favorite casino and card games available to play right on your phone. So head to the website or use your mobile device today to sign up and get in on the action. Make sure you use the promo code BELIEVE when you sign up for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV at BetOnline, where the game starts. And the games started this previous week, gentlemen, I shouldn't really say across college football, for a small portion of college football. This whole week 0 thing, Jed, I mean, what galaxy brain came up with week 0, all right? The high schools around me here in Western Pennsylvania have week 0 now. What are we doing? Why don't we just call it week 1, week 2? We do week 0.
There's going to be a week -1 before you.
Yeah, I mean, what are we going to do? What are we going to do next? Week X, Y, and Z coming up here next. I mean, geez Louise. Not the juiciest slate of games. All right, we're not going to lie to you. And there wasn't a bunch of ranked matchups or old school rivalries. Well, I guess Notre Dame and Navy technically is an old school rivalry. That was one of the big games of the weekend. USC in action as well too. Our guy Rich Rodriguez, Mr. Hard Edge himself, good friend of the show, Rich Rodriguez, of course, getting that first Division I win down there at Jack State. Again, not the juiciest slate of games, but it was college football, and it's something. And we're getting closer to week 1 here, depending on how you look at it.
You remember? Maybe you don't. You're too young. But have you ever seen Eddie Murphy Raw? Oh, and you've seen it.
I've seen Eddie Murphy Raw.
Yeah. You remember the bit that Eddie Murphy did about eating the cracker when you're starving? It was the most delicious meal you ever had in your life. Well, that's kind of what week 0 feels like. We haven't seen real football since the bowls, right? So at this point, offering up any level of competition is going to taste like a pretty good meal. And as you're watching those games unfold over the weekend, there were a couple top 25 teams, a handful of in action, and some things that stood out to me. You mentioned Notre Dame Navy, of course, being played in Ireland. We talked about this in the offseason, guys. There were a handful of rules changes, one of which affects the clock. Okay, but that's not really where I'm going with this. There was a rules change that it seemed to, when it came down, to make you ask yourself, is this gonna put the triple option academy offenses in harm's way? And that rule change was, if you start in the backfield by alignment, you can no longer cut a defender. Now, Owen, you can appreciate what that means, right? I mean, imagine what the impact that's going to have on one of these triple option offenses that the academy schools run. It makes life, which was already difficult, all the more difficult. If you line up in the backfield, you can't cut a defender. So what you ended up seeing was, it seemed to me, maybe a steadier diet of involving the wings in the option. Of course, there's always a steady diet of option anyway with the single back stuff, but it was already hard enough for the academies from for Navy. We saw against Notre Dame. And I wondered if this contributed to that. As Notre Dame won going away 42-3, of course, it was all about Sam Hartman, 19 of 23. He looked the part, 251 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. He literally had as many touchdowns as he did in incompletions. Last year against Notre Dame, Navy ran for 255 yards with that triple option offense, 5.5 yards a clip. This year, they only ran for 126 yards, 2.6 a clip. Now, you got a defensive-oriented head coach at Notre Dame, granted, and I'm sure that he spent the offseason, burning the midnight oil, watching tape, and getting ready for this triple option. And I'm sure that was a factor as well. But I have to wonder if maybe that rule change, maybe did something about the impact that it had on Navy. But I don't know. But Notre Dame looked like a pretty good football team. Navy looked like a team overmatched, as you might expect, trying to find some answers. But what do you think about that? Do you think that rule change with an offense like that had some kind of significant impact?
Well, it definitely puts those teams at a disadvantage a little bit. Most of the time when you are running a triple option scheme as far as the academies goes, you are a smaller team. So the cut block really yields itself smaller type players, right? And a cut block can be such an effective weapon in a running back's arsenal. So it's kind of changing the game up a little bit. Like you said, you get wings more involved and that kind of thing. You got to come at it different angles a little bit, but just another rule change to give the defense sleight of hand a little bit.
Yeah, they always said that when you're playing in academy school, you're going to have bruises below the knee for the better part of the next couple of weeks because you're getting cut so much. But now those cuts are going to have to come from somewhere other than the backfield. And the other game, we'll talk about Rich here in a second, but Southern Cal 56-28 over San Jose. Guys, to me, it looked like one of those Oklahoma teams, both the good and the bad, the explosive offense, but the lack of focus or production on the defensive side. I mean, if you're going to allow a Mountain West offense in San Jose in the opener, gash you for 28, you have aspirations to be a playoff team, much less a national championship team. You got to fix some things up with Alex Grinch on the defensive side of the football. Now, one of the interesting things to me, Caleb Williams was as expected, threw for almost 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, was pretty flawless. I mean, that throw that he made on the bad snap for that 76-yard touch, come on. I mean, that was like a video game. That guy's unreal. But the guy that jumped out, flashed right onto the scene, and he was so much heralded coming out of high school. They have a freshman skill guy, Zachariah Branch. He had 4 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown, but he also took a kickoff 96 yards to the house. He was a huge 5-star recruit coming out of Bishop Gorman. And here's some perspective for you guys in terms of the level of talent with some of these large high schools out in that part of the country. Bishop Gorman, of course, is out of Las Vegas. He was a 1,000-yard receiver, guys, on that Bishop Gorman team that Nico with Hamilton High School famously engineered that comeback against.
Ooh.
Yes, this kid was a receiver on that team that was on the
so
business.
He caught the ball comeback that Nico threw up all over
that was
during
Nico's
that
running
game.
back. But again, that just, you kind of wonder in watching USC. I do expect maybe in the next couple of weeks, I checked and they got Nevada upcoming, they got Stanford upcoming, maybe even the trip to Arizona State. If Arizona State has some things right offensively, maybe they could threaten with that offense. I don't know, but you get the sense that at some point USC is going to encounter some issues with that defense. And then Coach Rod, they held on for a big win against a UTEP team that's not bad. Maybe some questionable play calling by Dana Demmel in the final sequence. I don't know if you guys got to catch that game. Again, it was one of the only games on Saturday evening, and they had a 3rd and 1 and threw a fade incomplete, and they threw the football on 4th and 1. Jack State gets a stop, gets the win. I texted, Rod Smith after the game to congratulate him. Of course, they're not happy with how their offense played. That's just in the part of the coach's DNA. So there's room for improvement. But I get the impression in the jump up from FCS to FBS as a Conference USA member, that's what that team's going to be in for, is a dogfight each week to try and scrap out wins against, all these teams on their schedule that were bowl teams last year. But again, I have a handful of fun games to watch on Saturday, and those were the ones that I ended up catching some of and being able to talk about.
The Hard Edge Bar and Cafe
Edge,
was open for cold ones after a W.
Absolutely. I mean, it was great to see. I mean, obviously there's not an investment, but friendship wise, you are invested with Rod a little bit. And I mean, honestly, it's a homecoming if I went back, or if really any of us went back for one of his games. But yeah, like you said, Jed, I mean, it's another step up, right? So you're playing with the big boys. So it'll be interesting to see what they do for the rest of the year. Hopefully that offense can get fired up a little bit and start clicking on all cylinders, because they'll put some points up.
They certainly will. One more for you, Jed. You mentioned USC. Just 2 things there. The first, Zachariah Branch. I mean, just an electric game to be a true freshman and have that type of game in your very first game in college football is crazy. A lot of Reggie Bush being thrown around, right?
Tyreek Hill comps, even I've heard.
Yeah. We understand. I get the Reggie Bush thing, and I like where you're going there, Jed, because that's kind of where I'm going. I get the Reggie Bush. When you see a guy moving like that in that uniform, you're just automatically conditioned, right? Reggie Bush,
Yeah.
here comes the next Reggie. Because I mean, just we that uniform and a guy moving that gracefully and that elusive, it just always conjures up images of Reggie Bush. I like your Tyreek Hill. How about Jalen Waddle? Like, I see more Jalen Waddle
Yeah, I
in
can see
his
that.
in his game
true,
as
too.
like as just a lethal return guy who's just got breakaway speed. Like, Reggie was crazy athletic and was pretty like Reggie had breakaway speed, but he was also pretty twitchy.
Yeah.
Some of these guys are just burner. Like, they could beat Reggie in a 40-yard dash, but the way that Reggie could move laterally and side to side was just special. But did like seeing that from Zachariah Branch. It'll be interesting to follow his career in his freshman season. Your thing about the defense with USC, though, you're spot on. Like, you see this a lot. Like, I think Dabo Swinney's a great example. Like, Dabo Swinney had success at Clemson and had success in his coaching career, but it wasn't until he brought Brent Venables in, right? Like, a real defensive mastermind, and gave somebody control of that defense.
Yeah.
That they went to have a nasty defense and one that was good enough to get them to 3 national championship games and win 2 of those 3 or was it 4 national championship games and win 2 of those 4, whatever it was. Like, Clemson was good with Dabo Swinney, but they weren't national championship good until, again, you got to kind of swallow your pride sometimes in a way and hand over the reins of your defense to somebody who's that's their bag. I wonder if or when Lincoln Riley's going to do that, because I think he's got to do the Dabo Swinney, and he's got to give control of his defense to somebody who specializes in that, or he's always going to be really good, but you're right. They're just going to run into a team that they get into a track meet and they end up losing.
And there's some landmines potentially in that league.
Oh,
right?
that league's really good this year. It's ironic. It's ironic in their last season.
To win a shootout against Washington, because Washington's kind of similar to them. But you could run into, I mean, Dan Lanning's a defensive-oriented coach who was on Kirby Smart's defensive staff at Georgia before taking the Oregon job. So the culture in Oregon is going to be one that has an edge to it. But the one I really think about, you saw they fell short in Salt Lake City last year. Kyle Whittingham is a no-nonsense, physical, toughness first, toughness second, toughness third guy. Like somebody asked me a couple weeks ago, hey, why do you think, or how do you think Utah flourishes in this modern era? I said, well, I think they're in the back 12, and I think they're much tougher than the rest of that conference. I think they have a toughness that many of the teams in that league lack. I mean, they have an Eastern or a Southern toughness to them.
Yeah.
And until Lincoln Riley finds a way to fully turn things over to that kind of culture, it just has an Oklahoma feel. Yes, you can. When you're as creative and innovative as he is, and populate your offensive lineup with the talent that he does, I mean, Caleb Williams is a generational player.
Oh, right? They're going to win a lot. They're going to win a lot of games.
But at some point, it's not going to be enough to win another shootout. Somebody's going to punch you in the mouth and steal a possession because they're tougher than you. And that piece seems to be missing at least through 1 week in this small sample size against San Jose State. For all we know, they come out. They smother Nevada, they smother Stanford, they find some answers, they play well at Arizona State and get things right defensively. But this kind of looks like they did last year, and last year they kind of looked like Oklahoma. Offense first, offense second, maybe kind of sort of defense, but probably offense third.
Well said. It'll be interesting. Our college football season is underway. Nice little appetizer for week 0, right? But now we get the full entree, the full course meal here, as we get ready for a big opening weekend, Labor Day weekend here across college football. We're going to take a break. When we come back, if you listened to our podcast last year, I almost said through the years, like we've been doing this thing for a long time. If you listened to our podcast last season, we'd make some picks every single week, right? Owen's beer truck, Jed's signal caller, my defense. We're going to get Schuyler in on this as well, too. We'll take a look at some of the Big 12 games and have some predictions and some picks for you on the other side as well. You are in the gun. For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
For more West Virginia Mountaineer football content, be sure to follow us on Twitter @InTheGunPodcast.
I'm talking with J.R. Toothman of Toothman Ford. J.R., everybody knows a lot of pro athletes buy from you. What's the secret?
Just like Will Greer, future Hall of Famer Frank Gore, James Washington, and many more pros, these guys have financial advisors that are always looking out for them to save time and money, and that's why they always shop at Toothman Ford.
And what if you're like us regular folks that don't have people giving us advice?
You don't need a financial advisor. Toothman Ford will save you time and money no matter who you are. Plus, we'll buy your car even if you don't buy from us. Visit toothmanford.com and get a quick, instant cash offer.
That sounds like a score to me.
That's right. And as always, we'll take anything in trade from chicken wings to Super Bowl rings.
Toothman Ford's got a lot of fans. Here's another one, QB Will Greer.
This is Will Greer, former West Virginia and current NFL quarterback. And cars really do cost less in Grafton at Toothman Ford.
That's a fact, Will. Thanks. You can shop online anytime at toothmanford.com.
Let's go, Mountaineer fans. You're tuned in to In the Gun with Wes, the runaway beer truck, and the signal caller.
Back in the gun here, a thank you before we give our picks to our friends at Toothman Ford. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. Make sure you're getting your butt to Grafton for all of your vehicular needs. They've got a great online inventory, and they do so much for our student athletes and NIL, so make sure you're supporting our friends at Toothman Ford. All right, gentlemen, it's pick time. A little refresher, right? We did this last year, but for those of you who might have caught us along the way here, welcome to the party. It's a real simple concept, right? Jed's the signal caller. He's the quarterback. He picks your Big 12 quarterback of the week, who's going to throw for the most yards. Which team? Yes, that's right. Sorry. Last year we went with individuals. This year, just to make it easier, we're going to go with teams, and then we'll talk about some of those individuals, obviously, in the wake there. But Jed will give you the best passing offense of the week in the Big 12. Owen, of course, the beer truck himself, will give you the best rushing offense of the week in the Big 12. And then me, Mr. I guess, works for the organization that had the steel curtain. I'll go with defense of the week, and our buddy Schuyler is going to pick his Big 12 offense of the week as well, too. Jed, we'll tee you up here first as well. Your signal caller offense of the week here for week 1 in the Big 12.
Yeah, last year Owen and I picked individuals, and oftentimes what would happen, like for instance with Owen, he might pick a back, and the next thing you know, the quarterback goes for 160 on the same team. So I just thought it would serve us better to. Well, let's
I like this. I like this idea.
Yeah. Owen will pick the team that's going to rush. I'm going to pick the team that's going to throw for the most, or at least to the best of my estimation, which last year wasn't very good. I finished dead last out of 3. So Schuyler, only one way to go is up. So that's for me. But anyway, when you look at this week's matchups, a couple things crossed my mind. I flirted with Chandler Morris at TCU against Colorado. He didn't play that well in that opener at Colorado last year, even before he got injured. If you remember, that's when Max, the legend of Max Duggan was born. He came off the bench and never gave the keys back up. But I think what I'm going to do, and looking at all these matchups, I'm going to go the offense that will throw for the most yards in week 1 in the Big 12. I'm going to go with Texas Tech at Wyoming. And here's my thought process there. First of all, I'm a big believer in Zach Kitley and what he did with that Texas Tech offense a year ago. He was actually able to produce 3 different 1,000-yard passers, but obviously what they want more ideally is 1 4,000-yard passer, and they think that guy can be Tyler Shuck. Tyler Shuck, former Oregon quarterback, got dinged up for them very early in the season. If you remember, he went to Oregon for a reason. He was very highly recruited, a very talented kid, a very highly touted kid. So it was a big get for them when he transferred from Oregon. If they can keep him healthy, the last time they had one quarterback start every game for them throughout the course of a regular season was 2016 with Patrick Mahomes. So it's going to be incumbent upon them to keep their quarterback upright and healthy. And if they can do that with Tyler Shuck, I think they got an opportunity to do some positive things. what they're going to be facing when they go on the road to Wyoming. Again, kind of a zany, somewhat dangerous game for them. Wyoming has a D coordinator named Jay Sawvell. He does a good job from a fundamentally sound standpoint. 2 years ago, Wyoming's pass defense was among the national leaders. They led the Mountain West in pass defense. Last year, they fell off. They dropped to 8th in the Mountain West. But here's the big thing about it. This isn't the old Mountain West. They don't get tested the way that Texas Tech is going to test them. When you look at the Mountain West, San Jose State led that league in passing with 272 a game last year. 8 of the 12 teams in the Mountain West failed to average 200 yards passing a game. So they just don't on a regular basis face this kind of challenge. I think that Texas Tech is going to bring to bear. And the concern I have is this. Last year, the biggest shortcoming Texas Tech had is they stumbled on the road. They were a poor road football team. They finished 1-4 on the road. 2 games stand out. At TCU, they only threw the football for 157 yards. At Iowa State, against John Heacock's crew, they only threw the football for 141 yards. But the 2 things those games had in common, no Tyler Shuck. I think Tyler Shuck will make the difference. And when you see some of the leakage that Wyoming showed last year, I think some of that's going to hold over. For instance, early in the year last year, when they faced an air raid style offense, when Phil Montgomery was at Tulsa, Phil Montgomery comes from the old Art Briles Baylor style air raid tree. He's now the O coordinator at Auburn, but Tulsa threw for 460 yards on this Wyoming defense. So I think there's going to be some opportunities for Tyler Shuck, and I think Zach Kitley's going to put him in some good spots. So that's why I believe Texas Tech has an opportunity to throw for more yards in week 1 as an offense than any other Big 12 offense.
On the road up there in Laramie, huh? Jed, you're
On the road.
underestimating those rabid Wyoming fans. They're going to come in
It's a
on bucking
concern.
Broncos right up into Laramie and ready to battle.
It's not a layup.
No, that's a good pick. I like your reasoning there. That makes a lot of sense. I think it does. We will we'll mark down Texas Tech for Jed, and we will revisit next week. Obviously, it's time for your runaway beer truck of the week. Owen, which team in the Big 12 is going to rush for the most yards this weekend?
I went with the Sooners playing Arkansas State. They got some, obviously Eric Gray, who did well for them last year, departed. He's now in New York. So they have some good stuff coming back. Barnes, and a couple other guys, a transfer from Oregon. I'm not going to butcher these guys' names because honestly, I do them a disservice. Nice, but for real, I think coming back this year, they're playing Arkansas State as a tune-up game. I think what I've seen, what I've read, they're going to lean heavy on the offense this year. They got some guys that can really, like we said, they have the speed on the ground. So we'll see what happens. I'm going with the Sooners.
When the last time Arkansas State was on the field, Troy gashed him for 268 on the ground in the last game of last year. So they struggled against them last year.
I think it's a solid pick.
Yep, they're Wolf Pack, right? Arkansas State.
Yep.
It's gonna be a long day to be a Wolf Pack out there in Norman. That's all I gotta say. It's a solid pick, Big O. Listen, Oklahoma, I feel like it's always a good pick in rushing conversations. I mean, that's a big part of what they do. And I think that defense there is ripe for the picking for Arkansas State. Before I give you my defense of the week, our guy Schuyler, he went with UCF as the Big 12 offense of the week. UCF hosting Kent State. Those boys, of course, from Ohio. That one is on Thursday night, so we get a little early action there, early doors. Thursday night, 7:00 on FS1. UCF hosting Kent State. Schuyler going with Central Florida as his Big 12 offense of the week. Boys, I thought about going with the game that was on Friday night, Kansas. We've talked a lot about how high-powered that offense could be. They're playing Missouri State as well, too, at home on Friday night. I thought about that, but I'm going to go with Kansas State as my, or sorry, I said offense there. I'm all discombobulated. Schuyler took UCF as offense. I'm talking about defense. I'm going to go with Kansas State. They are hosting Southeastern Missouri State, and the Southeastern Missouri State university mascot is the Red Hawks, and it's going to be a long night to be a Red Hawk. It's one of those Power 5 programs against an FCS school. I just think Kansas State, they bring back a good amount from last year. They are one of those teams that, Texas seems to be the proverbial pick to win the Big 12 by most people, but Kansas State, a very popular pick right on their heels as well, too. And they're always a stingy defense, man. Every year, the players change, the coaching staff changes from time to time. But it just always feels like Kansas State is tough to move the ball on, tough to score points against. They're stingy. When you combine that with the fact that they're against a lesser opponent and they're at home and it's week 1, where defenses usually tend to have a little bit more success, I'm going with K-State is my defense of the week, baby. Jed, you're grinning over there. What's so funny, huh?
What's funny is 10 years ago, Kansas State opened the season famously against an FCS team and lost, and that was North Dakota State.
They did.
Guess who the D coordinator for North Dakota State was?
Oh,
Chris
no.
Chris
Okay.
Kleiman, the head coach
that's
at
pretty
K-State.
good.
That ain't happening again. So
No.
Chris Kleiman is not going to let that happen on his watch. I think that's
Was that 10 years ago, really?
10 years ago, believe it or not. Yeah.
That's unbelievable. Was that Carson Wentz at North Dakota State, or was that before Carson Wentz?
I think it was before Carson. I didn't think about that.
That sounds right, because he would have been 16 was his rookie year. So that would have been that would have been a little beforehand. So there you have it. There's our picks. Jed going with Texas Tech for passing offense. Owen going with Oklahoma for rushing offense. Schuyler, his inaugural pick here in the gun. He goes with the newcomers, UCF at home against Kent State for your offense of the week. And I will take Kansas State hosting Southeast Missouri State as your Big 12 defense of the week.
Believe. Let's walk them through that again, Wes.
Yeah, but real quick, Jed, before we do that and we tell everybody about the Navigating Podcast channel and we say our tearful goodbyes and all that stuff, just remind me real quick, who won our Pick'em competition last season?
It sure wasn't me. I'd have been happy to finish second.
Oh, big O, buddy.
I finished second.
Okay.
Oh, that must have mean that yours
Hey,
truly
first, you're
won
last.
the whole thing. I'll tell you what, though, Owen, we should have done some like the best fantasy football leagues are not the ones that give big prizes to the winner. They're the ones that do degrading things to the guy who finishes last. We should have had some punishment for Jed, like he finished last year.
This is
you
a
got to
good year to
sit.
start that.
You got to sit in
you
the
should
water.
have had to sit on like a Jello tray or something.
Yeah, sit have a waffle
For a
of
whole
episode
episode.
every hour for 24 straight hours.
Let me write
For
that
a
down.
whole,
so we can revisit
for a
that.
whole recording, we're gonna make you sit on a Jello tray.
A Jello tray. Okay.
Yeah.
How about a bicycle with no seat?
Oh, geez.
Whoa, I didn't
Oh,
want to
no.
go there, bud. I mean,
Come on,
I figured
bud.
the Jello tray was enough.
Okay.
But we'll keep track of this year. It'll be fun too. We got Schuyler in the fold now, so we'll have 4 of us, and we'll see how we do throughout this season. Maybe at some point we'll
It's not
decide.
going to be me this year. So you
Ooh,
guys
you hear that, Owen?
I'm calling my not
Hey.
last place shot
Hey.
there. So
Hey, look who's coming
Yeah.
to talk some Schmitt, huh? Okay.
Oh,
oh
bud.
yeah.
talking some Schmitt,
Hey,
some big
third
time
place or
Schmitt.
bust, baby.
Third place or bust. Flint Mega Bowl. Flint Mega Bowl. So there you have it. There's our Big 12 pick'em for this week 1 edition. Obviously, we've got plenty more coming at you this week. We'll have our Penn State preview right around the corner.
In depth, very in depth. Yeah.
Very in depth, and obviously, Jed gonna talk to Phil Steele as well too. Our first conversation with one of the czars of college football. So it's been a fun week so far. We got a lot more good stuff coming for you to make sure that you are not missing anything. We're gonna continue to remind you this for the next month or so. We have 2 different podcast feeds, right? One that's under my name. If you go to Apple Music or Spotify, it's in the gun. It's our logo, our white logo, and it says like by or author Wes Uhler, right? And then the other is our Believe podcast feed. The logo there is Owen hurdling the poor soul from Rutgers, Devin McCourty. We'll leave his name out. The poor soul from Rutgers that Owen hurdled there back in the Big East days. That's the one that's going to live in eternity, to live in perpetuity. So make sure you're subscribing to the Believe feed. It's the one that Schuyler does such a good job of sharing. So if you go to our tweets, if you go to our posts and you click on that and follow through there, it will take you to the right feed. But again, make sure you're subscribed to the In the Gun podcast feed that has the picture of Owen leaping Rutgers there, because that is the one long-term that we will be using. The other one will be eventually going away. So we want to continue to remind you guys of that as we, try and grandfather this thing in. But also, as always, just watch on YouTube as well too. You get all the cool graphics.
Those numbers are the membership's climbing quickly. Yeah,
Jed, I tell you what, your Manny Diaz, Neil Brown episode. I mean, you were getting some love from Happy Valley. I tell you, they were like, "Hey
that
guys,
offensive
this was
preview,
great."
if you haven't seen it, it's I think our highest downloaded episode since we started. The defensive preview's right up there, so there's an appetite for football right now. So thank you guys.
Certainly
Spread
is.
the
There
word.
certainly
Be an
is.
ear, tell an ear, just like we say.
Be an ear, tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. And yes, if you're watching on YouTube, you're good. No changes. You get all of our graphics on our beautiful faces as well too here. But if you are someone who likes to listen in the car while you're driving or you're working out, whatever, make sure you're subscribing to the Believe feed because eventually that other one will be going away. So that will do it for us today, but we're not going away this week. Again, our conversation with Phil Steele upcoming and our full Penn State preview as well too. One more time, be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. Make sure you're following along with us on all your different social media channels at In the Gun Podcast. Thanks to our guy Schuyler for putting this together as always. For the best teammates in the business, Jed Drenning, the signal caller, and Owen Schmitt, the runaway beer truck, I'm Wesley Uhler. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you soon again this week. You've been In the Gun.